Let us begin. My name is Tomáš Dopita, and I will moderate our today's Exploring Foreign Policy with Kristina Lunz. Let me go straight to the point. We live in dangerous times. Huge environmental, social, and security challenges are looming on the horizon. How can feminist foreign policy help us in our current rather difficult situation? How does feminist foreign policy differ from the traditional foreign policy? How does feminist foreign policy, what are its key priorities, and how do they translate into practice? What are its successes and main challenges? And how can or should we approach this rather new strand in foreign policy thinking in the Czech or Central European context, which is very specific in this respect? To discuss these issues and more, we have here today our dear guest, Kristina Lunz, the co-founder of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy, who will present us with today's main contribution. Following Kristina, Míla O'Sullivan, next to Kristina, from the IIR Prague, will focus briefly on feminist foreign policy through her critical scholarly lens. After Míla's contribution, we will open the floor to questions from the audience, and we will debate with Kristina. But before all that, we will have the pleasure to pass to listen to Nino Lejava, the director of the Prague Institute of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, who will open the event for us. We should speak into.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Your Excellency Ambassador Israng, dear Kristina Lunz, vážené dámy a pánové, it is my honor to welcome you on behalf of the Green Political Foundation and thank our partner, Institute of International Relations, for hosting this event. And I'm very happy to see so many faces here in the room. This week I spoke with a very good friend of mine about this seminar, and this friend of mine is a journalist at Radio Free Europe working here in Prague, and she's also an outspoken feminist. But when I mentioned this seminar in dialogue with her, she asked me, as a journalist who has to be quite skeptical, how this approach, the feminist foreign policy approach, would really contribute to a more peaceful and safe world for people. And unfortunately, she was not able to join us today here, but I'm sure that our guest, Kristina Lunz from the Center of Feminist Foreign Policy, will answer this question, or at least she will inspire us to answer by ourselves this question also. The feminist critique has finally captured foreign policy after a decade-long effort, and those who would like to proceed thoughtfully with foreign and security policy should therefore become familiar with the catchwords and not only of this new paradigm. We work in a country and we work with a society here shaped by the legacy and ideas of former President Václav Havel. Nowadays, as loyalty towards such values as responsibility and solidarity are even more important than ever, it is crucial to develop solidarity and solidarity networks globally and locally. And from my point of view, solidarity is also a essential pillar of the feminist approach. With today's event, and not only, The Prague office of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation aims to contribute to local and regional, Europe-wide discourse on the proactive role and position of small and medium-sized countries in the process of shaping the European foreign and security policy through the creation of in-depth analysis and organization of gender-balanced expert meetings. The initial idea of this initiative stems from a project connected to the 25th anniversary of independent Czech and Slovak foreign policies. In the publication Maximum Možného, Maximum of the Possible, one of the authors pointed out that small and middle-sized EU member states are often struggling with finding their own foreign and security policy agenda and role in the framework of the common foreign and security policy of the EU. Furthermore, the foreign policy of the Czech Republic lacks long-term vision and consensus of the fundamental values, which is partially caused by a power position and interest clash of multiple actors. I think this study is quite interesting, and we can provide this by interest. And at this event, we hope to contribute, of course, to a meaningful and inspiring discussion and creating, again, a networking space also for all of us. I'm thrilled that we can welcome one of the most outspoken young professionals in this field, in the field of the foreign and security policy, and as a co-founder of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy, Kristina Lunz is promoting these topics which we will discuss together with you. And she contributes, or I guess she already contributes to enhance the security for people worldwide through a more feminist foreign policy and diplomacy, and stressing these topics also in her public activities. And last not but least, I would like to express my gratitude to another brave woman, Klára Sovanková, my colleague from the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, whose brilliant idea was to invite Kristina Lunz, and who co-organized this meeting immanently. Thank you.
Thank you, Nino. Before we will give the floor to Kristina, we would like you to briefly introduce yourself. So I will pass this wonderful torch to you, and please just quickly say who you are, and that's it.
And organization, maybe.
Sorry?
Name and organization.
Yeah, name and organization.
Because I'm curious, that was my...
Yes.
Yeah, Christoph Wissang. I'm the German ambassador, and I think German foreign policy still has to learn quite a lot, and that's why I'm here. And maybe later on I can contribute to the discussion, what we are doing at the embassy.
I'm Henry Sum. I'm working with Northeastern University from Boston here in Prague for the next 2 months. And I'm here today because I'm curious to hear about any developments in feminist foreign policy here in the Czech Republic specifically.
I'm Vanessa Holler. I'm a student at Charles University and I study historical sociology, but I'm also interested in IR and I've never heard of it, so I wanted to come here.
My name is Nona. I'm specialized in public international law. I work in OEC. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jan Rollens. I'm from the Jan Masaryk Center of International Studies at the University of Economics Prague. I focus on security policy. I wrote a dissertation on the Swedish foreign policy transformation, and that's why I have also some links to the feminist policy.
Good afternoon, my name is Petra Aliduláková. I work for Ministry of Foreign Affairs for our CFSP department. I'm one of the coordinators of our common foreign and security policy. Thank you.
My name is Diana Young. I teach global politics at the English College in Prague, and I'm interested in anything that begins with the word feminist.
Hi, I'm Henriikka Hakala and I work for the Embassy of Finland here in Prague.
Jmenuji se Jindřich Pláter a jsem důchodce.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Zakia. I am a student for IB Politics, and I'm interested in J.N. Tickner, and that's why I'm here.
Hello, my name is Helen Stanikova. I'm studying at University of Economics, where I'm studying diplomacy.
Hi, my name is Kateřina Šeferíková. I'm a journalist. I work for Czech Weekly Respect, and I do cover European and foreign policy of the Czech Republic. And I'm very much interested in hearing what you're going to say, because I've never heard of the feminist foreign policy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Václav Machaň, and I'm from the Czech Ministry of Interior, and I'm curious. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kristina Lunz. I'm a student at the English College, and I'm looking forward to studying politics at a university level.
My name is Niklas Zeman. I also go to the English College of Prague, and I'm also interested in the feminist view of international relations.
Hi, I'm Clara. We already know each other. I sort of co-organized this, and I'm really happy that you accepted our invitation.
Erin Swan from the Irish Embassy, and looking forward to the presentations and the discussions afterwards.
Hi, Anders Lindgren from the Swedish Embassy.
Good afternoon, my name is Aneta Zachová, and I'm editor-in-chief of Euractiv CZ, and I'm here to get more information about the feminist foreign policy.
Hello, my name is Markéta Dočila. I'm a former civil servant from the European Affairs, and I just want to know what to do better in my next job. So.
Hello, my name is Jane Lee, and I'm a student from the English College, and I'm interested in the word of feminist.
Hello, my name is Irena Kalousová. I'm a assistant professor here at Charles University, and I just recently finished international relations PhD at London School of Economics. And I wasn't interested in feminism in London so much, but when I came here to Prague, to this super patriarchic society, I just somehow became forced to be interested. So yes, I'm really curious to hear more about the feminist foreign policy.
Hello, my name is David Jehlička, and I'm pretty much interested in that feminist perspective on international relations.
Hello, my name is Josefina Ofner. I work for the political department of the German Embassy, which basically explains why I am here.
Hello, I'm Zuzana Rozdolovska, and I'm also a student at English College, and I'm also interested in feminist foreign policy.
Good afternoon, I'm Ivana Specianova from the press department from the German Embassy, and I'm so very interested in this topic.
Hi, my name is Rose Smith, and I've never heard of feminist foreign policy, so I'm really interested to learn about it. I'm a PhD student at Charles University.
Hello, my name is Cecilia Washington, and I'm an intern here at IIR, and I'm interested in feminist theories of IR.
My name is Rachel Coburn, I'm also an intern here at IIR.
My name is Ivan, and I'm also an intern here in IR and also a student at Metropolitan University of Prague.
What an inspiring group of people. So please, Kristina, bless us.
No pressure, right?
Yeah.
Cool, okay. So, it is my absolute pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about feminist foreign policy. That is okay, right? Everyone can hear me, or do I need, okay. Shall I? Oh, okay, so it's important I actually use it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. So as we just saw, there are very different levels of people in the room. They're proper experts here who invented feminist foreign policy. And then there's some of you who are hearing about it for the first time. So please bear with me in case I'm talking about things you might know already, or in case I'm saying something you have no idea, then please ask me. So I'm trying to strike the right line between those extremes, I guess, of expertise and experiences of this topic. So I'm going to talk for 10, 15 minutes. Does that make sense? And then we open up, right? Yeah? Then, yeah, perfect. You first and then, okay, cool. And please also later ask me literally anything, because I don't know yet if you prefer to hear more about like institutionalizing the topic and what it's like to build an organization on the topic, or is it more kind of the IR theory behind it, or is it like the experience as a practitioner? So please ask everything afterwards. So I'm the co-founder of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy, and I'm also an external advisor to the Foreign Ministry. So I'm spending half of my week in the Foreign Ministry in Auswärtige Amt in Berlin, where I'm building the Ministers' Network on Women and Human Rights between Latin America, the Caribbean, and Germany. But my real job is obviously building the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy. And the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy exists pretty much because in 2014 there was Sweden and Margot Wallström and Prime Minister Löfven who had this crazy idea of declaring a feminist, not only a feminist government, but also a feminist foreign policy. And what initially was met as Margot Wallström, the former foreign minister, as she said, was met with laughter, turned into something that has inspired since couple of other governments, and especially organizations around the world, including mine. So feminist foreign policy, to give a definition, obviously foreign policy is the policy of a sovereign state in interaction with another sovereign state, or in international multilateral fora such as the UN, for example. And the feminism itself, my definition, there are different definitions, my definition of feminism is the actively working towards a society that is based on social, economic, and political equality of all sexes. So combining both, that would be feminist foreign policy is the policy of a sovereign state in interaction with another sovereign state or in multilateral organization, with a focus on the active promotion of social and political and economic equality of all sexes from an intersectional perspective. That sounds like a mouthful, I guess, pretty much. And feminist foreign policy, as it was started in Sweden, in Sweden it focuses on 4 R's. So Sweden, when they said, okay, like there's all this feminism, and Sweden has this really long tradition of feminism in the public sphere, they focused on 4 R's, Sweden. So Sweden has been focusing on rights, representation, resources, and reality check, meaning they want to focus on women and human rights. They want to put money, so the resources behind that work in their foreign and security policy, and they also want to get the representation of men and women right in all levels of foreign and security policy. And all of that for them is based on the reality check, which is the statistics and the research behind it. And speaking on research, let me make this kind of small detour to the kind of traditional understanding of foreign policy and international relations. So traditionally, and I guess what most of us, I mean, definitely myself, have been taught at university or at many think tanks out there, foreign policy and international relations, as the conventional realist realpolitik thinking goes, is this Hobbesche understanding of the world, where we have this state, and the natural state of international relations is a state of war and anarchy, and each state only strives to increase its own power and its own national interest. And feminists, for many decades, they came in and they've been saying, but no, wait, like that is pretty, like that's bit one-sided, like there are different ideas and how you can understand foreign policy, but no one listened to them, like because society and oppression of women. So feminists, on the other hand, they say, no, well, we don't believe that there's the US and the Iran and then Russia, and Russia's doing this to or Turkey's doing this to northern Syria, and then this country is reacting this way. Feminists say there's so much going on within societies and countries. There are all different levels of classes and races and genders and forms of oppression and discrimination, and we really need to understand them, because unless we do so, we cannot foster human rights and human security. Because only looking at a state's national interest does not automatically make a world more secure or make humans within a world more secure. And feminists have been saying that for decades, for over 100 years. And one prominent example that I always like to mention is the 1915 The Hague Conference, the Hague Women's Conference that took place during the First World War, where 1,500, I think, feminists, women from all over the world came together, women from countries that participated in the First World War and countries that didn't. And they came together in The Hague because they were like, what the hell is happening? Like, why is this world war happening? And what can we do to, first of all, make it stop? And what can we do to avoid another world war? And they set out all those ideas and demands, which included, for example, universal suffrage, because at that time only very few countries gave suffrage to a certain class of women within their country. It included mediation over militarized conflict resolution. It also included demilitarization and the dismantling of the military-industrial complex. So, and more demands. And they had all those demands, and then they went to capitals and prime ministers and presidents in different European capitals, and they were sharing their ideas. And they met with many important people, but no one took that on. And surprise, another world war happened as well. So what I'm trying to say by that is when Sweden in 2014, when they declared a feminist foreign policy, yes, they were the first country in the world to do so, and it was incredibly brave. But it was not their invention. Like feminist international relations theory, that's been gaining more and more prominence and importance since the 80s. But it's been like there's this 100-year at least tradition of feminists trying to shape how we understand international affairs and foreign policy, and their demands to reprioritize how we act within foreign affairs. What after 2014, what Sweden did back then, despite them still receiving lots of criticism, and I hope we'll hear a little bit in a second maybe as well, they've done an incredible job to the world, to feminists all over, because they gave the impetus not only for inspiration but also to develop the concept further. It was, for example, 2017 when Canada decided, when they launched their feminist international assistance policy. So Canada has been doing feminist development policy since 2017. And it looks like with the elections yesterday that they might continue given the outcome. And then we had France earlier this year in March, International Women's Day, to officially announce a feminist foreign policy as well. We've not seen that much coming from France yet, but they've used the label, so we're following up when we are also in close contact with the French embassy in Berlin. And only in September now, a month ago, Mexico, at an event in New York during the time of the General Assembly, announced a feminist foreign policy. We've also done some following up with the Mexican embassy in Berlin. They haven't presented any details yet. Let's see what's coming. It was definitely a surprise to many that Mexico made that announcement. But that's definitely really positive developments, what we're seeing on state levels. Germany definitely does not have a feminist foreign policy. Germany is doing interesting feminist steps, I would say, and despite UN Ambassador Heusgen in August at an event in Berlin saying that Germany has a feminist foreign policy, it does not. He said it because Germany has a female chancellor and a female defense minister. but Germany does not. But Germany is doing in a couple of really small projects in different areas. The project that I'm working on, the feminist network between Latin America, Caribbean and Germany is definitely one of them. And having a foreign minister that so prominently focuses on human rights, also at least publicly on demilitarization, as well as the fight against right-wing populism and right-wing terrorism. And these are all important aspects of a feminist foreign policy, but it's in no way institutionalized in the German foreign ministry. Another aspect that I have written down here is when we talk about feminist foreign policy, many countries then, when they are asked, so what is your country doing? They would very quickly talk about the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Many of you might have heard of it. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is an agenda that was established by a UN Security Council resolution in 2000. That is Resolution 1325. And Resolution 1325 stipulates that women need to play an active and important role within security policy and peace processes, and when we talk about conflict, and that we also need to focus on sexualized violence and conflict and so forth. And since this agenda, the Women, Peace and Security agenda, was established in 2000, there have been 8 follow-up resolutions as well since today. And the Women, Peace and Security agenda most definitely is one of the most prominent and most successful, I guess, achievements of feminists within the era of foreign and security policy. But women, peace and security policy is only one aspect of feminist foreign policy, because feminist foreign policy is this way of understanding how to rethink foreign policy and really question its core assumptions. Speaking of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and as I like to give a concrete example, because I realize when I might talk about feminist foreign policy, it sounds a bit abstract as well, because in the end it's like a intellectual concept that we're trying, and many are trying to put into practice. So speaking of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, so Germany, for example, has been almost a year now on the Security Council as a non-permanent member state. And before or during its election campaign, in 2018, Germany already announced that if they get elected, they want to focus on a couple of things. They include climate justice, disarmament, and also women, peace and security. And feminists all over the world, they were like, amazing, of course, go ahead, Minister Maas and Germany, do that. When I mean we, I'm talking as feminist civil society, obviously, when we then found out in early this year that Germany wanted to bring in a resolution on sexualized violence and conflict, we were first like, okay, let's look at this more closely, because in general, the idea of Germany or any state to give a feminist agenda lots of space within one of the most important fora of international security policy, the Security Council, that is a great thing. Though, one thing that can be where we have been a little bit critical about is the fact that there has been too much focus on portraying women as victims, like the sexualized violence thing, right? Whenever pretty much, if I was a cynic, which I'm not, because I believe cynicism is the lazy excuse of people to do nothing. But if I were a cynic, I would say this exactly happens when you bring feminist ideas in such a militarized and security environment, that feminist ideas are turned into victimizing the political minorities you try to push and empower. So we were like, okay, Germany, sexualized violence, okay, cool, let's see. But what then happened if we started looking around, and obviously the current environment where we're at, we see currently at the at the United Nations and in international affairs more generally, one of the strongest pushbacks on women's rights and political minorities' rights that we've ever seen. So we, my organization, including others, we published this open letter saying in March earlier this year, we said, hey, Germany, in general, we think that's a great idea, but please be careful, because you're sharing the Security Council with veto powers, like the US. And the US, since the election of Trump, has been extremely misogynist. So if you want to bring in that resolution, please be careful. We do not want this agenda, women, peace and security agenda, to be watered down. During the negotiations of the draft agenda, we learned more and more what the US was trying to do, and the US did in April when Germany brought the resolution to the Council. They did what had been unheard of in any negotiations around the women, peace and security agenda. The US said, okay, Germany, if you're bringing in that text as it stands now, we are going to veto it. And that hadn't happened before, because the US, with its misogynist stand again anyone's or women's self-determination and control over their own body, they said, we're going to veto the German resolution if any mention on sexual and reproductive health rights stays in there. And what happened in the Security Council then is really symptomatic of what we can currently see when it comes to, I guess, the feminist battle on a more broader international area. That this is really kind of the aspects around control over one's own body has become to the battle line between countries that are misogynist and more autocratic and countries that are more progressive and value human rights for all. So the result of what happened at the Security Council was that Germany took out that language. There has been, we've been giving a couple of interviews, and there has been lots of talk around it from a technical, because people always say, so what should Germany have done? Should they not have brought it in? Or should they, what would have been the better outcome? There are different opinions amongst feminists on that question. I personally think, so there have been technical improvements, no doubt. Victim-centered approach, the focus on civil society, a focus on men and boys, the link between the Arms Trade Treaty and gender. There have been great things that Germany put in that resolution, but the political signal that what the US did, that is really extremely destructive and dangerous, and it has an effect on something that's currently debated in the Security Council as well. Another non-permanent member state is currently working on another resolution as well, where feminist organizations doing lots of lobbying around that as well. So that was only one tiny concrete example where having a feminist understanding of the world and a feminist and an approach towards human rights for all makes a huge difference about how you go about issues in international and foreign and security policy. Shall I lost track of time. I would have more points on here. Shall I, or should we? You tell me. A few more minutes? Yeah. Cool, because I don't want to steal too much time from you. I can, but maybe we can leave it to the discussion, the different areas of what would feminist foreign policy mean for climate justice, and what can, for example, Germany do next year on the Security Council, and peace processes, and preventing violent extremism, and what else, disarmament, ATT, nuclear ban treaty, anything. We can talk about all that in a second.
I will just take this opportunity and introduce briefly Míla, because she didn't have the opportunity. Míla is a researcher here at the Institute of International Relations, and she's focusing in her research and writing mainly on the women, peace and security agenda and its discourses and its implementation.
Thank you. I'll be quite critical, so I would like to start on a positive note, because the word feminism and feminist is very unpopular in the Czech Republic. It's basically almost missing from the public discourse, Yet we happen to have 3 events within a week. Today's event, yesterday there was another one which was Feminist Aims 30 years ago and now, organized by Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung. And also last week we had an event at the American Center called Let's Talk About Feminism. So that's something quite very unusual for perhaps it is a signal that times are changing a little bit, even though it's probably not going to make the word of the year in this country. But I think it's important to talk about it, and I would like to thank the organizers also, Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung and Kristina Lunz for their support. So I will briefly talk about the emerging research on feminist foreign policy, referring mainly to the Swedish case, and also introduce the Czech context afterwards, so that we have some foundation we can have for discussion whether it is possible or unlikely for the Czech Republic to have a feminist foreign policy. So the academic research on feminist foreign policy as a concept is very modest, is still emerging. But as we already heard, there's quite extensive research on some parts of the foreign policy, women, peace and security agenda, for example, which has developed since 2000 quite extensively. There's an important point made by several scholars such as Jackie True, Karen Agestam and Annika Bergman-Rosamond, and that is that feminist foreign policy. Feminist foreign policy is quite radical, and the point is that it is more controversial than what has been so far gender mainstreaming, which has been an international strategy since the 1995. And gender mainstreaming is basically mainstreaming gender into the existing frameworks of peace and security and international governance, while feminist is something about challenging the structures, challenging the power hierarchies and gendered institutions within foreign policy and within the peace and security structures. So from this perspective, the feminist foreign policy is quite radical and can be seen as transformative, something revolutionary. And I would like to mention also that the primacy of Sweden is not a surprise, because for a country to take such lead, it has to be strongly rooted internally. So that in Sweden there's a culture of gender equality, and we can also see Kristina mentioned that there was this ground prepared internationally with since 2000 huge women's movement around the women, peace and security agenda, and also it's 100 years old, as you mentioned as well. So. The Swedish foreign policy is strongly based on women, peace and security. It is. I'd like to quote one of the one of the starting sentences. It says, "Ensuring that women and girls can enjoy their fundamental human rights is both an obligation within the framework of our international commitments and a prerequisite for reaching Sweden's broader foreign policy goals on peace and security and sustainable development." So I think this, what I find quite important is that the enjoyment of fundamental rights is a prerequisite, is a precondition. So that means that it's the girls and women are going to be on board to reach peace and security. It's quite transformative in this way. And you already mentioned the R's, 3 R's, 4 R's. Concerning some of the challenges, there are some of the challenges concerning conception and implementation. In reality, feminist foreign policy is not so radical because it's not pacifist but pragmatist. It doesn't rule out the use of hard power. So this is something that has preoccupied the women, peace and security scholarship for a long time. It's whether we should strive for revolution or compromise in international relations, and the reality of international politics has basically led to compromise always. There's also in Swedish foreign policy there's this human rights approach, and also emphasis that gender equality is a matter of peace and security, which is something also previously emphasized, for example, by Hillary Clinton. And this is also something that scholars have a problem with, because women constantly need to justify their presence. So there always has to be some selling power. And Margot Wallström, for example, used to have this quote, "More peace, more women, more peace," which can be also problematic because we see the binaries of peaceful women versus violent men. So this is something quite common. And on the other hand, the Swedish foreign policy, sorry, we have some Swedish representatives here, so they might also hopefully enjoy the debate later. There are many radical transformative elements in the Swedish case because it tries to address feminist security in broader terms, important emphasis on women's economic empowerment, on sexual and reproductive rights already before the backlash global. So this economic empowerment is important because it aims for addressing structural inequalities, which is very important given the political economy of conflict and post-conflict development, which usually prevent women from participation. I did field research last year in Ukraine, and the typical case, which is also the case of Ukraine, is that within the post-conflict or conflict development, there's emphasis on building up the military and building up the political structures, while there are cuts in the social areas. So there's usually international financial institutions which come and help, but this is there are conditionalities. There has to be austerity measures. So in Ukraine, the austerity measures and the government reforms which were carried out affected mainly women. So next to the ongoing conflict impacts on women, there's this public cuts which affects education, transportation, jobs in the public sector mainly occupied by women. So women basically have no money to participate in peace building, and this is the typical case, political economy of conflict. And the increased militarization, which is a special case in Ukraine because of the ongoing conflict. And this brings me also to the implementation challenge, which is perhaps the most controversial one, is that it's the fact that Sweden is one of the largest exporters of weapons, and it is the military industries that fuel conflicts, which is contradictory to the feminist principles, which we already heard emphasize demilitarization, disarmament, and non-military solutions. So, and it is also frequently being attacked from this, attacked is a strong word, but being discussed this way. So it's this kind of vicious circle. But in 2015, we could see what feminist circles called a truly feminist foreign policy when Margot Wallström cancelled or she declined to sign the arms deal with Saudi Arabia because of human rights violation. And that was really applauded as a radical feminist foreign policy. I would like to later perhaps also discuss how it has developed since, because you mentioned the backlash. So there might be something, the backlash we can see also in the Czech Republic, where the gender ideology is very frequently discussed in the public space. So if I switch to the Czech case, you mentioned on the German there are some feminist steps, and I would compare the Czech case. The Czech Republic recently went from being gender blind, having gender blind foreign policy, to having heading towards promotion of gender equality and women's rights. There has been quite a significant advancement in the last, especially last two governments. It has broadened its human rights conception, even though there's still the focus on civic and political rights mainly. Czech Republic also adopted National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security in 2017 and is currently preparing a gender equality strategy, the whole of government strategy, which has one of the key areas also external relations. So it is active especially at multilateral levels, but while all these policies are in place, these are often declaratory documents. They're prepared without some broader civil society consultations, and there's also little systematic support. No, for example, practice. In practice, there's no guidelines and so on how to carry out, how to translate these policies into practice. So, as I mentioned, in relation to Sweden, this is very much related to gender equality situation domestically, and in the Czech Republic, this is not the case. It's not the case as in Sweden. There are significant barriers in the society with deeply embedded gender stereotypes, and the institutional culture. Where I did some research at the ministries recently, and the institutional culture is very gender hostile. If we look at the formal and informal institutional practices, it reveals that gender is frequently ridiculed. It is joked about at the MFA, and I can give an illustration of some of the interviews would say it is a success when one doesn't mind the topic, or concerning gender, some people are even told not to do anything. And this is not limited to ministries, but this is also the case of, for example, NGOs. So while I was doing interviews, there's an NGO which works with advanced government like Canada, or which have foreigner security development, development feminist policy, or other governments, and they work with them closely, try to meet their gender equality standards, while internally in their NGOs, I would quote one interviewee, "I use feminism as a joke." So this is something that really is quite problematic. And also there's no organizing, we talked about it earlier, very important. There's so many, in Sweden you have so many platforms and NGOs that focus on women, peace and security and foreign policy. So you have Organization 1325 and all these kind of platforms. Well, there's no gender NGOs focus on foreign policy because they are preoccupied with domestic issues, and that has been a long-term problem. That even the Czech National Action Plan on 1325 has been basically drafted as a top-down document, and of course it resulted in a quite proclamatory document. There are feminist-minded individuals in the ministries, and they're doing very important work. But because the environment is quite hostile to it, it's not sufficient to progress faster. But we had a working group on gender equality strategy this spring, and there were people from ministries and NGOs, and it showed there are so many issues that there are so many issues to women's equality in diplomacy that should be covered in the future, and this is something that the Czech Republic should focus on in the future. Also, there's in the public discourse, I would like to mention another example before I pass over to the debate. The debate on Istanbul Convention, we've heard very unbalanced, very unbalanced and uninformed debate. The rejection, from my perspective, the rejection of Istanbul Convention, which is still on the table because the Istanbul Convention has been only signed so far, and the rejection would really mean a real blow to foreign policy, human rights promotion, because it's the flagship of Czech Republic's foreign policy, and it is precisely one of the areas where the Czech Republic is quite active. For example, as part of the Universal Periodic Review, for instance, makes recommendation to states such as Poland, Brazil, Pakistan, Ukraine. It's all on the website. You can find they make recommendation to support gender equality and sexual and gender-based violence. So while we recommend it to other states, we are not able to sign Istanbul Convention, which prevents gender-based violence domestically. So that would be quite once, I hope it will be signed. Once it is signed, it could also be used as a tool in foreign policy to share practice, to promote it in other, especially in Eastern Europe, where the gender-based violence is quite an enormous problem. And it's probably not surprised that the two countries that didn't even sign the Istanbul Convention is Russia and Azerbaijan. So, but that's probably for another discussion. I think I'll pass on.
Thank you, Míla, for your intervention. What I really took note of is, in your view of the critique, is this being aware of the tendency to gender essentialize women and men. And what also struck my ear is this question, implicit question, whether the feminist foreign policy is some kind of next level of gender mainstreaming or not, or whether we really even want it to happen in the future. But this is just my impressions, and I would like now to open the floor to your questions and comments. But we are many here, so please be succinct.
Can I make one comment quickly? Yeah. Is that okay? Because that was a really important point about this gender essentialism, like this idea that there are some people many people out there who say, so we need more women because that means more peace, right? Because women are more peaceful. And you can, within feminism, there are like different strands of how feminist thinkers argue regarding their feminist foreign policy. And that is one group that exists, those gender essentialists, that believe that women inherently have some special powers, I don't know, and they're more peaceful. That is definitely not what we as an organization, what I personally, or what kind of the more radical feminists, I don't know what you call them, what they say. Like that, it's not what it's about. It's about socialization, right? If we lived in a world of like 100 years of matriarchy and where women were expected to be violent and powerful, then we might have a very different outlook in society. So there's no such thing as women being, I believe, and that is also what psychological research tends to show. There's no such thing of women being the better ones or the more peaceful ones and men being the more violent ones just because they're born a boy. I mean, yes, statistics show that most terrorists, most extremists, most perpetrators of violence, they're all men. But not because they're born men, but because of the society and how we are socializing different people and expecting different things from different genders in our society. So gender essentialism is something that I personally, or as an organization, we are not we are trying to debunk. It's important you brought it up. What was the second thing you brought up? Because I wanted to mention something on that. Yeah,
the issue of whether the feminist foreign policy is
gender
going
mainstreaming,
to be something like the next gender mainstreaming.
And
do we want or need this kind of success?
I think, and what you said, Míla, was really important there. That feminist foreign policy or feminism and in its origin is to be understood as a transformative force within society, to not only sit at a table as women in a peace process or whatever, but to go there and dismantle or destroy the table and completely build it new. We don't want a piece of a cake, but we want to make a new cake, if that makes sense. So it's this transformative approach. And if we can't turn, it would be problematic in most areas if we turn feminist foreign policy into mere gender mainstreaming, because that would mean bringing feminist ideas into areas that per definition can't be feminist, and that is the highly militarized way in certain areas how foreign policy is being conducted. And here we really go already deep into certain conversations, and you have these conversations in different areas of society, but in foreign policy amongst feminists, it's very often about, okay, so what we're going to do? Do we want to completely destroy the military and ban weapons right away? Because that is at its core what would be feminist. Or do we try to get into those structures and change them from within? Different feminists have different ideas about that. Sweden, for example, I know Margaret Wallström, former foreign minister, she once said if she could decide on her own, of course she would stop selling weapons, but she can't because of how structures are in society. So I believe we need to find a way of how we get as close to a transformative process without compromising our values as possible, given the current structures of society and architecture of security policy. And that sometimes means compromises, sometimes it doesn't. For some people would make certain compromises, others don't. Like I personally, because I've been sitting in the Foreign Office for the most part of the year as an advisor, I've been personally criticized of doing so and being criticized of being compromising my values. I have a different approach, but it's fair to say that different people, I guess, have different approaches to that.
So now please ask your questions. That means raise your hand. Okay, over there. Does it work over there? Yes?
Very well, thank you for your starting contributions. Coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and having been there for over 16 years now, I can understand the criticisms and its long fight. Still, there are some positive things. I think we should say that we already signed the Istanbul Convention, right? It's the ratification process that got stalled. It's now on the side of Parliament, and it's the governmental office who leads it. So we have given our support to it. That was the signature, and now we are waiting for the national side. I very much appreciate the practical approach, as you say. I think we are not in a position to say we're going to start feminist policy tomorrow. But still, the human rights are one of the principal issues that we believe in, and we work for them. So there is so much space that we can take. Like in the UPR, since 2008, we have been giving recommendations in areas of fighting violence against women, in changing legislation towards rights of women. So without giving it a name, we can do some steps. I think that's as much as we can do at the moment. Speaking from the lowest level, I'm still just coordinating. Thank you.
Okay, so I see a question over here. I can pass the torch over myself, and then there is the question over there.
Thank you very much, both of you. I probably have a question to both of you. You mentioned that feminism is trying or challenging the Hobbesian vision of the international relations, and especially how or what the purpose of national interest or what the goal of the national interest. But could you develop it a little bit further? You know, the idea of the feminist foreign policy, because I am quite familiar with the feminist theories of IR, but still, I would like to know what's the special contribution of the feminist foreign policy. And more practical question, how to make it win-win? Because I still think that if you present any kind of feminist idea, at the end of the day, men will have feeling, and probably rightly so, that it's a piece of cake. It's not a different cake which will be nicer, and we will all have better life living in this piece of cake. They still think that it's not going to be me as a man, it's going to be you as a woman. So how to really, what argument do you use in order to somehow debunk this notion that it's going to be lose for some if it's going to be win for feminists? And the third, if I may question, it's also very practical. Do we have enough feminists? Because the challenges are enormous. And I would like to know about Sweden, because in this country, always the argument is we don't have even enough. I'm not talking about women only, enough feminists, enough people who would be able to really somehow bring new ideas to old structures, like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like conferences organized by this institution, which are always, I don't know, if it's 80% men only, it's fine. It's a good ratio. We have German foundations, we have European Commission, which on the one hand are claiming that they are supporting gender equality, at the same time they're supporting conferences which are, as I'm saying, 80-20 is still okay. You know, so, but usually the argument is we don't have enough women. So what do you do with it, especially in the question of security and foreign policy? Thank you.
So, yeah, please just respond right now so that we don't
so that I don't forget.
And then we will go over there.
I'll start with the last one. If we have enough feminists, I don't think we have enough feminists anywhere. If we had, we would live in a more peaceful world, and that is